All right, time to get into yet another book that isn't D&D or Pathfinder. So this one is Numenera, Discovery. So there are other books for this out there, but this is the primary book. And so this, as you can see, is the actual world that you'll be playing in. So now we get into the nitty-gritty details of the actual book. Typical table of contents lets you break down what is actually in this book and everything. So now in here we get into like the description of the authors and the makers of this book, getting into like, oh hey look, this is everything that led up to this and everything. So then we actually get into like the actual story, or in a sense like a poem on like characters and stuff. So quick, what kind of try slide this back and forth so people can like pause and read this real quick before we get into the actual like book itself and everything. So then we come into getting started. So now the concept of this is like it's called To the Ninth World. So what this book is based on is it's in a sense set in the far-flung future. A couple things that come to mind with fantasy books, think of like the world of Shannara, Terry Brooks's books. That's in a sense like a fantasy that's set in the future. Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series can also be kind of set like that because if you think of like the TV series that's come out, they harken back to like times before before the whole series of the Wheel of Time takes place and everything. So think of that as like that concept as well. This is the set in the far flung future. So now we get into like how to play. So we get like a brief descriptions on like a basically background. Then we get in depth into like how to your characters. So this is a lot more in depth than like your typical D&D or Pathfinder, and it's a totally different like way to do it and everything. So talk about like and descriptor types and focus, the stuff that we'll be getting into later. So here you can see a bunch of skills that you can get into. So you talk about like the type, basically the type of character that you're going to be playing, and so it goes into like the different types of tiers and stuff, and like how you pretty much like level up your character, different types of like the nano here gets into like the different like leveling up and everything, abilities, backgrounds, and basically again tiers for this type of character. And then like we get Jack, as you can see, and then like the different tiers as well. So like you can see like the bunch of different characters, in a sense the character classes, and then we get into descriptors, basically like what basically your type of character that you're going to be playing. So it goes into like the whole different types of like of descriptors. So like for instance like intelligent, that's one example. So that's basically that focus with that chapter. Then you get into actual character focus, what you're focusing on. So like you can see like the different like focus points, and of course you kind of want to make sure that you're not having two PCs that are the same focus or whatever. So then we get into like the mental powers. Think of like psionics and stuff in the D&D and Pathfinder context and everything. So we actually get into like the different types of focuses that you can do with the characters. And of course this is very in depth because like there's so many different ones that you can choose from. Good old shark bait, ooh ha, from Finding Nemo. And of course like it gives you nice descriptions of stuff in here as well, pictures for the different types of like focus points you can get and everything. So as you can see, this chapter is relatively long because there's so many different focus points. And then we get into the actual equipment that you can be using. So harken back to like weapons and armor and like your like adventuring gear that you can find in like D&D. And of course you got the trusty tables and stuff that you can always use for that stuff. And then we get into the nitty-gritty details of actually playing the game. So we get into the rules. So it gives like the key concepts, like a table right here that you're going to come across in this game. And it basically like the task difficulty, like think of like DC and like difficulty dice or whatever in Pathfinder and D&D. So then we actually get into like all the different things that you're going to come across, like for instance, as you can see here, distance, timekeeping, your encounters, rounds, and initiatives, just like a D&D, and you got your actions, gold damage and armor, and different types of damage and stuff. Then it gets into like a special types of damages. So basically, like as you can tell, basically this is the rules of the game and how to actually run the game and how to and pretty much get across like anything that you get into. And then we get into the actual world, and so like living in ninth world. So then we get actually see here like a map of like pretty much like a shrunk down version of this, and this is where we actually start getting into like different the ideas for this world and everything. So then we actually start getting into like a focus point of each individual area that's in that map and everything. So like and pretty much helps you like set the stage for this whole new campaign or like this whole new game, and like outside of like a D&D or Pathfinder. And so like I said, it keeps going into like the different like areas. Think of like a focus point, sort of like the Blue Rose videos that I've done, where like the source book for all this itself. Kind of think of like something like that with like focusing in on the wards for the particular for all this the city. And so you can see here another focusing in on another section. So then like chapter 11 gets into like the beyond, which is like another part of yet another part of this campaign setting and everything. So at the end I'll show like the big map that you get in like the back of the book and everything that like you can pretty much like could in a sense like fold out. It folds out and you could hang up on the wall so people get like a good idea, like a nice big map of it and everything that you can reference while in game and everything. So like as you can see, this section is pretty big too, getting into the nitty-gritty details of each individual area. Sort of like the same kind of concept like with the Adventurer's Guide to Wildmont source book that I've done. Gets in, same kind of concept where it gets into like the different areas of this world and all the different concepts and different like things that you're going to encounter in each specific area and everything. So as you can see, it gives you a nice big focus, so like you could kind of focus in on just certain areas for your adventures. You don't have to necessarily do the whole world. And now we get into like the actual organization. So like perhaps like you like think of like churches or like mages guilds, fighters guilds, stuff along that like in a sense line of thinking. But like these organizations are going to be different to basically fit this game as well. So that is relatively short, and then we get into like the as you can see part 5 creatures and characters. So like basically like a bunch of the creatures that you're going to be in a sense, monsters that you're going to fight. Think of like orcs and goblins and like ogres and stuff like that from like D&D or your good old Pathfinder. So as you can see, some of these monsters are really kind of unique to this world and kind of like good old ghastly looking. So like gives it a nice unique flavor for this game and everything. And so as you can see, we got like a kind of like a nice good variety of different types of monsters that are kind of like good old scary looking, and it could in a sense run into like a horror type of theme with just these monsters and descriptions that you get into. And so then we actually get into like non-player characters. So basically like ideas that you can have for like the NPCs that your characters will run into. Like you can see the Aeon Priest, Bandit, Explorer, and Nano, Town Guard, Warlord. So like gives a table for like friends and foes. Even more like a named NPCs type of deal. Then we get into like here with the part 6 to Numenera. So now Numenera is actually like think of like all the technology and like medicine and devices and everything that we have nowadays. Like think of like so with this being in the far-flung future and everything, this is kind of like artifacts and stuff and like kind of stuff where people are kind of scratching their head like, wait, what's this from what does this do? And so like imagine us coming across like someone from the Viking Age in like the 10th century coming across like one of the U.S. space shuttles or whatever. They'd be kind of like, huh, what the hell is this type of deal? And so this is where this chapter gets into like kind of like all the kind of neat stuff that was left behind from the previous worlds or pretty much the previous iterations of the world. Like as you can see here, and also artifacts that like I mentioned, and so it gives you a good list of like all the stuff, like items that you can come across and use for your game. So like think of this stuff as kind of like a magical items type of deal, like your magic item list that you find in the Dungeon Master Guide and like the D&D, and then different like oddities and discoveries. Like think of like odd technology and scientific stuff that you come across, and then of course we get into actually like running the game. So it gives you like ideas on how you use the rules. Like you can see here like rules versus the story, set and difficulty ratings, and it kind of gives you like all the information that you need to actually take the rules and be like and like previous chapters like the NPCs, the Numenera, and creating the characters and stuff. Like, okay, here's how you use all this stuff, and to pretty much run like an effective, fun game that everyone is going to want to come back and play and everything. So that's what this chapter is all about, with using the rules and everything. And so, excuse me. And now, as we're getting to the end of the book, you also get into the ideas for like building like a story, like in a sense like adventures and or campaigns. So it gives you all the like the what you need to kind of like help you, not only as a PC but quite possibly as like a DM, of course, like a DM, GM, narrator, whatever, like the player, the person who isn't a player character is whatever their role is. Like I said, DM, GM, whatever. So here you can see like they're actually called the game master. So there's so many different ways to call them, the game master, dungeon master, narrator, like a storyteller, whatever it is. So like we can see getting into like now, as I'm getting ahead of myself with flipping, realizing the ninth world. So now we're getting into like the nitty gritty details of like, okay, like how do you describe stuff? Like you don't just say like, oh well, you come up to like a mountain. You say like, oh, you come up to the lonely mountain, and on it still capped a mountain and everything. So you really get into the descriptions and stuff of how like everything goes, and like you're pretty much setting the stage for like a very like a in-depth kind of campaign. So then we get into like adventures, as you can see here. So adventures, like different types of adventures that you can kind of like come across in the different like flow chart, or like the pretty much like A to B to C, or like you do the different type of flow chart. Like, okay, this happens, you go here, that happens. And so the whole types of concepts that you can get with like running adventures. So, and these are actual adventures themselves that you can go through as well. So, and kind of go through these relatively quickly so they don't necessarily spoil them. And then get into the appendixes and everything. So like different options that you can have for like the species that you can do in this game and everything. So, and then bibliography and resources gives you like basically a list of stuff that you can read. For fiction, gives you like television, movies, nonfiction, and then of course the Billion and Five Club, like pretty much like all the people that helped create this. And then you can see the character creation walkthrough. So on the back it kind of helps you like oh hey, so how do we do this again? It gives you like pretty much like a step-by-step go through with the character creation, and gives you like the glossary, pretty much like the definitions of the concepts that are used in this game. And of course, as you can see, now we come to the actual character sheet, which is totally different than like your D&D or Pathfinder character sheet. And of course, you also got the back end as it's upside down, so you can pause and with both of those. You got the index where to find the stuff, and then like that goes back. And then of course back here you got like pretty much all the different books that you can get for this. And of course, like as you can see, some that say that they're available in 2019. Of the recording of this, it's like now 2024, so all this stuff is now available and everything. So you can now see like a bunch of different more source books that you can get for this actual book and everything. So this is pretty much like in a sense, the core rule book. Now what I'll do is, like I said, flip out the good old huge flip through. So right now, as you can see, we got this huge ass poster on like one side. And of course, my screen isn't necessarily big enough to fit all this in. So I'm going to kind of do like a kind of like a scan, so you can see now, like you can see a nice huge map of the world. And so I'll try and go a little slower so people can pause and actually get a good idea of like of this big map and everything that you can see. And so that's pretty much like the fold out map that you get in the back that has that like in a sense nice poster on the back. So it's just basically a bigger version of this that you see in the front. So this is one of the many different options that you have other than D&D and Pathfinder. So this is just to highlight yet another option that you can get into that is completely different than your traditional fantasy role-playing games.